Today's guest is Dion Tabrett, who has been a practicing homeopath since 1992, a self-confessed Compton Burnett geek, and author of the book Burnett Rediscovered, which can be purchased through Narayana Verlag, or check the show notes for my Amazon affiliate link, which will give me a small kickback to help pay for the costs of running this show. Dion has run clinics in Berkshire, Cornwall, Devon, London, and Bristol, and is now back in Devon. He works closely with Mike Bridger at the Contemporary College of Homeopathy in Bristol, where they both run the college clinic together. Dion teaches case analysis methods, anatomy and physiology, and works in the college clinic. Mike and Dion co-founded and run the Orion postgraduate course, which is one of the longest running and most successful postgrad courses in the UK. To get in touch with Dion, visit his website, diontabrett.com. That's DIONTABRETT.com. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now my mum and your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome to Homeopathy Hangouts. Today, we have a guest that I've been working on trying to get on the show for a little while, the lovely Dion Tabrett. Welcome to the show, Dion.
Thank you, Eugenie. Thank you. Nice to be here.
I think the best part of the podcast is that I get to actually have a chat with people who I've done courses with, and I've spent hours with you and you wouldn't even know. I've done your lecture on CHE. I love CHE. I've had a membership there for a few years now. The best courses ever. But I'm personally a huge fan of organ remedies and supporting the organs of the body. So when I saw your lecture, that was just so absolutely spot on. But before we get into all that good stuff, can you tell our listeners a little bit about how you first discovered homeopathy?
Oh, I certainly can. Yeah, that's not your run-of-the-mill story. I first discovered it by getting a new drummer in the band, and the old one split and left, and we had to get a new one because there was gigs coming up, and we got this guy who was a little bit older than the rest of us. We were all late teens, and he was, what was he now? Let's not get it wrong. He was approaching 30. So at that age, that's quite a big difference. And during rehearsals, he saw me puffing on an inhaler. I had a Ventolin and Becotide inhalers back then for asthma. And he said, all right, during a break, said, oh, you've got asthma because you're puffing on the inhaler. I said, yeah, that's right. And he said, I'm studying homeopathy. I never heard of it. He said, and I need some cases for graduation. Will you be my guinea pig? And playing in bands, we were guinea pigs for lots of things. And I said, yeah, cool. Give it a go. And he took my case and he treated me. And after about a 4-month time period, no more inhalers, no more asthma. And I thought, that's stunning, because the medics had said to me, you've got this, it's your genotype, you're an allergic IgE responder, overproducer, you got this for life. And so here comes this guy who's a great drummer, good chess player, and fixed up the asthma in 4 months. So I thought, that's crazy. I want to know about this. So he started lending me books. I thought it was a fascinating subject, never heard of it. Enrolled to the college up in London, the precursor to CHE, LCH, London College of Homeopathy. And they actually said, no, go away, you're too young. Can't come, because I think I must have been 19 or 20. And I wrote back and said, I still want to do it. Why don't you let me do it? And they said, oh, all right, you seem keen, have a go. We'll see what happens. And so they let me in at a young age, and I studied from there. And yeah, then we went on and practiced together, and we still play music today. So, and still no asthma. And that was, whoa, how long was that? 35 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, that is.
So yeah, that's what got me into it.
That's really cool. Well, you're one of the few people, because of course Hilary Dorian and Ian Watson were both 19 when they started studying. So it's very rare at that age. I have a request for you, and I'm like completely serious about this. I think Marcus thought I was joking when I said this, but I want you and Marcus and Frederick Schoyens and Luke Norland to get together, and maybe for Homeopathy Awareness Week, like create a song, and people can buy it on iTunes or whatever, so we can fundraise for, I don't know, a charity or something. Marcus already has the name for the band. He said Nux Vomica. It's going to be the band's name.
That sounds like the post-party
Yeah,
name
absolutely.
For the band. That's the acoustic live lounge the day after, the night before.
It's a great name for a band. So yeah, I'm putting that request out there. It's now, we're recording this in February. Homeopathy Awareness Week is the 10th of April. You've got 2 months to pull this together, okay?
Well, I'm always up for a jam, so just have to, yeah. I know plays guitar. What's the others play? What's Luke Norland
Luke and
play?
Frederick does guitar as well, but Luke also does the French horn.
Yeah, okay, we need a drummer. You see, I'm a bass
I need a
player.
drummer.
If we're going to keep this thing tight, then we need a drummer involved.
Well, I've got a set of electric drums actually literally right next to me. I bought it for my husband for his birthday, but he hasn't had much of a play on it yet. So yeah, I don't.
Oh, get him on it. Get him on it. I'll pop round. We'll have a jam. I want to come to Australia.
Amazing. So let's have it. Speaking of jamming, let's jam about the organ remedies. What are they? How did you get into it? And who the hell is James Compton Burnett, for those who don't know?
Well, I started college and my friend Lynn, who got me into it, he was also running the college bookshop. If I remember correctly, he took over from Ian Watson running the college bookshop. And the advantage of that is you get to read all the books you want to read. And the assumption from students and graduates buying books is that the bookshop seller knows his wares or her wares. And so they were compelled to read lots, which is fantastic for knowledge. And we used to travel. So I lived in, like Lynn, we lived in Berkshire. So that's 60 to 70 miles west of London. And we used to travel up on the train to college 3 days a week and then back again in the evenings. So we'd chat about all the books and he'd lend me books and I'd discuss the lectures, and I started getting into a couple of authors that he liked. And then I really liked James Compton Burnett. And if you don't know who he is, I'll tell you, he was English homeopath, born in Salisbury, graduated in Glasgow, and then practiced initially in Liverpool and then down in London in Welbeck Street, which runs parallel to Harley Street. And he's the guy who really integrated organ therapy into homeopathy, because initially it was a different discipline. It was always been used by humans. We've always scoured nature for plants that could help us, because organ remedies are plant remedies almost exclusively. But it came up through Hippocrates, Paracelsus, but then there was a guy called Rademacher, Johann Gottfried Rademacher, who's a contemporary of Hahnemann, German physician, who they never communicated, but bizarrely enough, Rademacher rejected the allopathy of his day, so venesection, leeches, purging, cupping and venesection again, and he explored the Paracelsian idea of the law of similars, which was rooted back to Hippocrates, but he explored it exclusively from an organ remedy perspective. That's what he looked at. So he used the law of similars, he used the minimum dose, but not dynamized, only diluted into material drop doses. And he really elaborated this whole system around organ treatment, organ remedies for organ diseases, which is very similar to homeopathy, but it's not as holistic. It's not looking at mentals and generals in anything like the scope that the homeopaths did. And long story short, the organopaths, although they're a separate discipline, there were so much similarities that they were swallowed up into the vanguard of homeopathy. And it became something of a sideline. It was, Crataegus for the heart, Chelidonium for the liver, Ceanothus for the spleen, until Burnett got interested. And because he was fluent in a number of languages, one of which was German, he could read the 2 800-volume books that Rademacher wrote, and he incorporated it into his homeopathic practice. And he always described himself as half organopath, half homeopath.
Did you say 800 volumes or 800 pages?
800 pages, 2 volumes.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas if you look at the literature today for Rademacher, we've got a small pamphlet, which is 30 pages tops. So Burnett, because he could read the German, absorbed all of that and incorporated it. And then it's just reading through the 23 books of Burnett and how he punctuated his miasmatic, vaccinosis and constitutional treatment with also organ remedies that I found fascinating. So that's a long-winded explanation, but that was how I got into it, and that's who Burnett was in that sense. And he found it very, very effective in practice and still do.
Well, I have a funny story to tell you. So my son's 11 now, but he was probably about 6 months old. He had this like patch of ringworm come up on his arm. And I was still like in my final few months of studies. And I tried all the usual remedies. You know, tellurium was the first one I think that most people try. And some sepia and some sulfur, and like nothing worked. And
you're going to Barcelona, aren't you?
Don't spoil the punchline here.
Oh, no.
There was this homeopath that retired in New Zealand, and she was selling these boxes full of books. And my son was about a year, so this has been dragging on for about 6 months. And my confidence in homeopathy is like really going down. And I go through this book, like this box of hers, and I find this tiny little book that says ringworm and Burnett. And I don't know why he needed, like, it's only a tiny book, but why he needed a book to say it. But basically the book says, use Basilina for ringworm. And I swear I gave him a handful of doses. The ringworm was gone, never to return again. But up to this day, a decade later, my husband still teases me and said, remember when Joshy had that ringworm that lasted 2 years? And now my son's old enough to get the joke, and he kind of plays along with that. But Burnett saved my butt on that one. I just wish I went through that box of books earlier.
Good on him. Yeah.
And so many clients I've helped with ringworms since then, thanks to Basilina.
Yeah, he calls it the pathological simillimum to ringworm. The Basilina is a fantastic remedy for that particular fungal infection.
And talk to us then, because you are also the author of a wonderful book, the Burnett Rediscovered. And I mean, you said he wrote so many different books. So admittedly, they're not like huge volumes, but what was that process like of writing this book of yours? It's been hugely successful. I know my copy is, I'm going to get one because, like I said, I love using Burnett, but I know heaps of homeopaths that use that as their Bible. And the comments are that it's really easy to use, very well thought through, easy to understand. And you clearly know this man as if he's like your bestie. So talk to us about this process of writing this book. What was that like?
Yeah, he's at my right shoulder in the clinic. He looks over all the prescriptions and gives me the nod. So it's a photo
nice. Of him. Most people have a photo of Hahnemann in their clinic. You've got a photo of Burnett in your clinic.
Yeah, I should get Hahnemann in somewhere. You're right. He's not there at the moment, but I should put him up there. It was when I started studying him, late 80s, early 90s. I just really got bitten by the bug and read all his books, and then kept rereading them and enthused about them to my classmates. And they would say, yeah, all he does is give Basilinum and Thuja to everyone. I said, yeah, he does, but he does organ remedies and constitutional, and he's given those for chronic disease, miasmatic blocks or vaccinosis. There's good reason. And so I qualified, and then I did some good graduation cases, and the college thought they were good and said, would you come and teach a lecture? What do you want to teach? And I said, yeah, okay, I'll teach about Burnett, because it just wasn't on the syllabus. He was alluded to and talked about, but there was no formal structured lecture about his methodology. So early 90s, I started teaching about him, and I'd encourage people to go and read the books, and not many would. They'd come back. I'd see them again as postgrads later on other courses, and go, let's just recap the Burnett stuff. And they thought, yeah, okay. And it was like I'd never told them as undergrads. And so I thought, okay, this isn't right. Why aren't they reading the books? So, and I got requests, why don't you just put all this to paper? And I thought, yeah, I will. You can't like Burnett and not want to write a book, really. So I just formulated it all and put it together more as a guide through Burnett's work. So there's 3 distinct chapters. There's the organopathic remedies first, then there's the symptom similarity second, then there's the medical doctrines third. And that was how he viewed all cases from those 3 different perspectives, and then unwove the cases by jumping between each different discipline. And so I really wrote it as a guide, and then punctuated it with my own cases, in the hope that then people would go and read all of his books, which I'm thinking that's possibly the case now. So I don't know. Yeah. So
the book came out in 2017. So it still clearly took a while to kind of get this all together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was collecting information from it for years and years and years, and then it took about 2 years of just buckling down and doing it. It's tricky when I've got 3 kids. I've got full-time practice. I've got teaching at most of the weekends, so it's hard to carve out the time. So 2015 to 2017, I just thought, right, let's do this, get it done.
Amazing. And talk to us a little bit about organ support. Why do you feel it's important, and why do you feel it's something that homeopaths should pay a little bit more attention to, and how would you use it in the clinic? Maybe some advice that you have for homeopaths that might not be already incorporating this in their practice.
Yeah, well, I use it every day in the clinic. There's usually, I try and keep it at 8 patients a day. Often goes above that, and I will invariably give an organ prescription to at least half of those. Why it's important? I'm going to quote Burnett. He said that an individual, their organism can only be as strong as their weakest organ. That's the ceiling in their improvement of health. And he loved to draw analogies, and he said it's exactly the same as the weakest link in a chain. You might have a chain that can lift 10 tons, but if one of those links is going to snap at 2 tons, that's a 2-ton strength chain. And from that analogy back to the human or the organism, it's exactly the same. So people can have really good constitutional treatment, really good chronic disease treatment, tautopathic, etiological, isopathic. But if there's a weak organ involved in there, which in 80 to 90% of cases there is at some point, then strengthening that will greatly advance the case. And there's profound ramifications in the book. The very first case that I give on the organ remedies is a guy with heart disease who came in at the start when I just started practicing in the early 90s. And he was depressed, and he had weak heart muscle, and he was fit all his life. And the medics were going, okay, we've got to put you on heart tablets. You're going to be on this for the rest of your life now. And he was strongly averse to taking any type of allopathic medication. So he came to me for treatment, analysed the case, thought, okay, got depression, got heart disease, various other symptoms, give you an abridged version. So this is aurum metallicum. This fits perfectly because I built the hierarchy on mental emotionals, physical generals, physical particulars. So cardiac symptoms was a local particular symptom. And aurum did nothing at all. And I tried different potencies, centesimals, LMs, and then by the time of the third visit, I think he's not going to stick around for long. Out of desperation, I said back to my Burnett work and thought, okay, Crataegus, just as a spacer, whilst I'd work on the case and come up with a better similimum. And when he came back, his heart was going good. The muscle had improved, he could oxygenate better, and he could go back to doing his gardening and his walking and exercising. And so his depression disappeared. And I realized at that point, I'd turned the case upside down. I'd put the depression as the most important symptom, but the reason that was there was because his heart wasn't strong enough to do the things he loved. When his heart muscle got stronger and he could return to his activities that he really enjoyed, there was no need to be depressed. And that really strongly opened my eyes to the huge ramifications that occur with organ prescriptions. And Burnett writes about it. He says, you'll find when you get correct organ remedies, your patients, this was his very words, your patients will wind up in rude health, which I thought always tickled me as a saying, but I appreciated it. And it really did advance my understanding of organ remedies. And these days, as we get an older population, as people go into their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the norm in the West and all over the world where possible is allopathic polypharmacy. That's what people come in. They're taking 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 different allopathic meds on a daily basis. Liver has to detox all of those drug molecules. You could just take in a case with somebody who's got allopathic polypharmacy, straight away I'm thinking, okay, do we need to consider something for the liver here, as well as lifestyle choices, what people like to imbibe, be it alcohol or coffee? The liver's the organ that's going to be detoxing that. So very often you can look at any case and sometimes, almost always, make a justification for an organ remedy. But I just have to give a disclaimer here, because as Burnett wrote, when the constitutional remedy, when the similimum also covers the organ, then in many instances, you don't need the organ remedy. So it's not a given that you'd always have to give the organ remedy. Ideally, the constitutional remedy will cover that spectrum of the case as well.
So if you had like a pulsatilla client who had lymphatic issues, you would just give pulsatilla in a high potency? Do you mean like, say, like a 200C pulsatilla as opposed to giving it like as a 6C on a daily basis to help the lymphatics?
Yeah, pulsatilla I find much, much more for endocrine system, uterus, hypofunction of the ovaries. So if there's the typical case would be irregular menstruation at menarche. So if a case presents with that and the pulsatilla as well, the ideal scenario will be the pulsatilla covers the mentals, the generals, and the local symptoms. But let's say if they're a different remedy state, say opium is their indicated remedy, which doesn't have anything like as strong an affinity to the endocrine and uterus and ovary function as pulsatilla, then I'd be thinking, okay, I can get opium to cover those symptoms. But now in the back of my brain, I'm thinking, okay, do we need a uterine remedy as well? Do we need some Fraxinus americanus, Thalassae bursa pastoris, etc., etc.? So then be considering going between the two over a course of time.
Amazing. And actually, I was your lecture that I learned about cyanothus from, and didn't realize what a big spleen remedy there was, and also the Fraxinus and the Thalassae bursa as well. So I know Hilary in her lecture mentioned the Fraxinus and the Thalassae bursa as well for like uterine support. I made actually like a little combination remedy a few years ago. It's got both of those in that, and I've had such good feedback from clients for all sorts of fibroids and all sorts of things that this combination remedy has been really useful for. Do you ever use the organ remedies in combinations? Like, would you throw a few different liver remedies like dandelion and milk thistle and whatever in combination, or do you tend to just prescribe single remedies?
My strong preference is to do one at a time, and preferably in tincture format or low decimal. So, but much in line with Burnett's longitudinal practice strategies, I'll rotate through different ones.
I was going to say, I remember you saying that, like 1 month, one month, the next one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Cool. And sometimes you can see different responses between each different remedy. And sometimes it's accumulative. You get an amelioration from one, then you change to the next and you get a further amelioration from that. Ringing the changes was what Burnett called it. He thought it was advisable to give a sequence of similar acting remedies over a course of time, as opposed to sticking with one and seeing how far it will go. And I think that is perhaps more attuned to the organ remedies than general constitutional treatment. But I would say that it possibly is looking very favorable also for lesion treatments. When you're looking specifically at a therapeutic, sometimes if a case stagnates or slows down, it can be beneficial to switch from one lesion remedy to a very similar acting lesion remedies. And the underlying reason for this, I believe, is that when we're treating with organ remedies and when also we're treating with pure lesion states, the degree of similitude is reduced. It's not as doesn't need to be as accurate or as strong for constitutional similimum treatments where you're matching across the entire spectrum of mentals, generals, and locals.
And have you got a preferred potency that you use? Do you tend to use more the X's or the low C's? Or you said tincture before. Do you use many tinctures as well?
Yeah, use a lot of tinctures. For organ remedies, then if it's available in tincture form, that's my preference. So that would be 5 drops twice a day for 1 month, then reassess as a generic prescription. If for reasons the person can't take tinctures because they're preserved with alcohol, so if they're children, for religious reasons, if they're alcoholic or recovering alcoholic, then I don't give meds with alcohol in for obvious reason. Then I would use anything from a 1x to a 6x twice daily, or a 1c to a 6c twice daily.
Or if they're on polypharmacy and there's contraindications with any of the tinctures that you're using with the pharmaceutical medication that they're using, I guess then the X potency would probably be a better option rather than a tincture.
Exactly right. And there is, for some individuals, that is a preferential medium for the remedy that suits them as an individual. So some people do fantastic on tinctures, but not on decimals. The opposite is also true. Some people take the tincture and it doesn't hit the spot, or it can even disagree with them. They can induce nausea and they can induce a skin eruption, usually for just 5 or 10 days or so at the start. But often that's an indicator, okay, let's switch now from material to a more dynamized dose of a low decimal or a low centesimal.
And I guess if it's a tincture, that's also processed by the liver, right? So if you then, and not just the alcohol, but the phytochemicals in the actual tincture, I would be processed by the liver. So if you've got a liver struggling, then maybe an X potency might be a good option.
If they're really compromised, then that's the gentlest way to start. Absolutely.
And you quite like using your nosodes as well, I hear.
In the words of Burnett, he claimed to have used every bacteria known to science at his time as a nosode, and viruses included. So I think, we've got our work cut out to catch up for where he is. But nosodes are vastly, vastly important. Everyday prescriptions, nosodes.
Yeah. It's funny how I think as homeopaths, we can be a little bit strange sometimes, that we think that because the remedy is of a different origin, that it should be used in a special way. I think my first kind of aha moment for that was I was taught in 2010 at college that you give a bowel nosode once and you never repeat it within 3 months. And then, I did Hilary Dorian's lecture and she said, give it daily for 21 days. I'm like, what? That's not how we were prescribed. And now I give it Mondays to Fridays for 8 weeks at a time to a client, and they do great on it. But I feel like nosodes get that bad rap sometime as well about, it shouldn't be used like this or that. But it's just a remedy. It's just energy. So we should stop putting boundaries on what you can and can't do with the remedy. If it's been potentized, then you kind of just use it like everything else. I don't know. Maybe there's something I'm missing in all of this.
I think it's the association with disease products for a lot of people. And then there's we hypothesize that's going to cause disease, but the whole point of Hahnemann's potentization, dynamization is you're changing the killing potential into a curing potential. But there's also all the connotations. If I said to a class of students, okay, we're all going to do a proving, I want you to all prove, I'll tell you it's a vegetable remedy, then loads of people will go, yeah, that's great. If I said, okay, we're all going to do a proving, all I can tell you is it's a nosode, it's a virus or a bacteria, then the drop-off's large, Not everyone wants to sign that and go for it. So, and there's all sorts of myths. You either give carcinosin to somebody who has a history of cancer or has active cancer, and it's not the case. Those nosodes are useful in that type of case.
Yeah, I mean, we were actually taught you never give a nosode to somebody when they have the active disease. So, for example, we were taught never give potassium to somebody who has whooping cough. But I've often found that is exactly what the person needs when they have that illness. So it's very interesting. We've got a lot of, what's the word, Chinese whispers, maybe in homeopathy about it.
And that is a huge problem. And I think one of the things is that people will report on anecdotal evidence or just a few clinical examples, and there's no peer review of, okay, you saw that, but let's see, has this happened 100 times? Can we verify this? And you'll hear all sorts of things such as never open a case with a nosode, or like you said, never give the nosode of the disease when they're in the active state of the disease, where past homeopaths like Francisco Xavier Eizayaga, he would use the nosode of the disease intercurrently alongside the indicated remedy. So no matter what they were consulting with, and he had some wonderful, fantastic cures of all manner of things, that very enviable clinical reputation. And he was a urologist before he trained as a homeopath. So he's treating cystitis and endogenous bacteria such as E. coli in the bladder causing the inflammation. He's given that alongside the cantharis or the sarsaparilla or the staphylos aureus or the pulsatilla, and having clear results in 2 or 3 days, half the time of antibiotics. So it's incorrect. When people make these statements, they should be challenged, and then we want evidence. We do suffer from Chinese whispers, myths, anecdotal reports, and then it goes like wildfire, because I think the reason for that is because it's individualized every single time. And when somebody says you must never or don't you do, then some brains will latch onto that and go, okay, at least I know not to do that. That's some guidance, but it's incorrect information. Individualized every time is the correct thing.
I'm glad you gave us a little segue there into talking about Eizayaga. And I was really excited because I remember learning about him at college. I've never really done too much with his work after that. But then I interviewed Christina Donka, who is with the National Centre for Homeopathy in the US. And she mentioned that Eizayaga's, I don't know if it's his son or his grandson, is actually going to be presenting at the JAHC in Texas in March this year. And I'm like, what? There's like
fantastic.
more Eizayagas? I didn't know that. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to get him on the show. I've emailed. I haven't had a reply yet, but it would be amazing to have a chat with him and hear that. But talk to me a little bit about Eizayaga.
Yeah.
So that's somebody else that you teach about and that you use in your practice. What is it for people who haven't, what is it? Who was he? And what can you tell us about his method?
Yeah, Francisco Xavier Eizayaga was an Argentinian homeopath practicing from Buenos Aires. And long story short, he practiced as what we would categorize as a classical homeopath, much in line with Candibage and Pesquero, also down South America, for 20 years. And then he readjusted his practice and switched it all around and introduced his idea of layers, where you're looking at a lesion, fundamental, constitutional, miasmatic layer through a case. And essentially, if there's a disease state, if there's a pathology that's the uppermost, you treat that first, which is exactly in line with Burnett's idea of the pathological simillimum. And then when you've removed all the layers, the ultimate is to treat the constitutional miasmatic states to consolidate the treatment that you've done earlier on. So it's basically treat the disease first, treat the patient afterwards. And he had some really fantastic cures. I've studied him since I started, just as much as Burnett. And he's the second book. It's just in the final stages. It's
Really?
at least 3. Yeah, it's going to be 3 times as big as the Burnett one. And that
so this is going to be where the Spanish guitar is going to come from.
Yeah, when I get the royalties from that, I'll pop over to Granada and get myself a nice Spanish guitar and come back. Yeah, so that'll go to the publishers this year, and then they'll edit it, so it should hopefully be ready.
Amazing. When you said a second book, I thought it was on Burnett. I didn't realize it's on Eizayaga. So that is very exciting to do. Wow.
No, it's been good.
Amazing. And can you tell us anything else about Eizayaga? My knowledge is really rusty. I remember us going over to college, but it's not something that I kind of carried on. It makes a lot of sense, though, but you make it sound so easy. Just treat the layer that's presenting itself. But obviously, the realities of practice is that there's obviously multiple things going on sometimes. So just finding that layer can be quite tricky. You might have some tips on that.
The main thing to understand is that his approach was to categorize the case history into discrete strata or layers that you can then differentiate between particular remedies for each aspect of the case. Mm-hmm. So rather than take a full case history with all the medical history or the personal history or the disease symptoms, and then look at the whole thing and try and find a simillimum that matches the totality of characteristic symptoms for everything, he would say that's exceedingly rare. Less than 5% of cases present like that. He would say what you want to do is to differentiate the lesion state, the disease state. So let's say somebody's got an asthma, and I'll be very short and simplistic now. So let's say they've got an arsenicum asthma on top of a pulsatilla fundamental state, on top of a calc carb constitution with, let's have a tubercular active miasm in the background. So the analysis would come through, okay, the asthma's been there for 2-3 years. The closest remedy to the asthma symptoms is arsenicum. However, the mental, emotional, and general symptoms suit pulsatilla. However, the morphological characteristics, this could be a 12-year-old kid now, is that of calc carb. And if we look back to the first 3-4 years of life, they loved eggs, they perspired heavily on their head when they went to sleep, they were prone to constipation, they had lymphatic swellings and tonsillitis. And then due to an etiology at age 6, which he would call a pathobiographical event, just to add more terminology, they had an emotional shock and they stepped over from a calc carb expression into a pulsatilla state.
Okay.
And then a few years later, the asthma comes on. And that, when it occurs, is strongly arsenicum album, worst midnight, restless, thirsty, anxious, dry, tight, wheezy respiration. So he would say, right, rather than try and find a remedy for all of this, we give the arsenicum for the first 6-10 months for the asthma. Then after that, we'd probably spend an equal amount of time treating the pulsatilla state. And then after that, we consolidate with calc carb and tuberculinum for the constitutional miasm. So he divided and categorize the cases along a chronological line, but also in regards to pathology, psychology, and general and local symptoms. And for me, it's wonderful clarity for understanding simple to complex cases. It dovetails very neatly with Burnett's idea of the pathological simillimum and the symptomatic simillimum. And I think for me, it's the clearest way to practice. It's what helps all cases. So that's how I will analyze alongside Burnett. And yeah, it's the subject of the next book, which will be done. It'll be done this year.
Very, very cool. You gave that example so clearly. I could just see all the layers. It was awesome. You are such an amazing lecturer. Apart from CHE, that's your course that I've done, but whereabouts do you do any of your own lectures as well? Or is it mostly just through the colleges? Like, do you have any postgraduate courses that you have available for as by yourself, or are they all done via the colleges?
There is a postgrad course which we're looking at launching either late this year or early next year. That's the Orion postgraduate course that I do with Mike Bridger. So that's normally it's run sometimes in London, sometimes in Bristol. We're going to look at Bristol, I think, this coming end of this year, start of next year. So that's a 5-month postgrad course for people who are in practice. And then I teach at various colleges, teach in Bristol, Wales, Dublin, Cork, and of course CHE in London. And that's enough, because a lot of the courses are at the weekends, and got to draw the line at some point.
Family, for sure.
So, but those are all the things that I do teaching wise. But strongly devoted to the writing at the moment. That's the main thing. Get that done.
So, Dion, where can people get hold of your book? Soon to be books. Where can they get hold of your work? Are you still taking on new clients? Where we'll put it all in the show notes, but just where's the best way for people to contact you if they want to know more?
Okay, so the book is published by Narayana Verlag in Germany, Black Forest. So they've got their own website, and they've loads and loads of publications, really good publishing house. So you can go straight to Narayana. There is a website.
I tried to get them on the podcast and they said no, so you'll have to give them a little nudge.
I was curious. I wonder why.
I don't know. Good little nudge from me. They've got great books. They've got wonderful. I've purchased through them several times, and there was at one stage during the pandemic that they weren't shipping overseas, so I ended up buying a couple of ebooks through them. But I really I've purchased many books from them over the years, so that would be the best place to get the books from. You don't sell them yourself; it's just directly through Narayana Verlag. Okay.
No, I don't send them myself. There's my website, which is my name, diontabrett.com. That's got all the clinic information. So that's where people go to get into clinic. It's very, very busy. There's just a number of months waiting list at the moment.
Wow. And then also a final message that you want to leave our listeners with after all this wonderful information you've shared. How do you want to summarize this all for us? And what's the last message that you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, buy all of Burnett's books and read them and keep rereading them. I still read them today, and I've studied them for a long time. And each time I reread them, I learn something new. So obviously in homeopathy, we never stop our materia medica study, never stop our clinical experience, which should shape our philosophy and study of the repertory. But the thing about Burnett, the thing I like the most, is it's one of the few places where you get longitudinal case studies, where you get cases that are followed for a couple of years to 5 years, 8 years, sometimes up to 15 years. You'll get information back on somebody that he's treated. And I think as a profession, we really need to drill down into that aspect to get an understanding of what the clinical reality is when we take on people and they ask for how long will it take, what's the prognosis, what can we cure, what can we not cure. So Burnett is still my favorite source of that. So the take-home message is buy all his books, read them all, and then keep rereading.
Well, now that you've said that, where do you recommend people get hold of them? Because, I mean, they mostly these old school ones, right? I think like B. Jane probably sells them, but would you just find them on Amazon, or where would be the best place to find them? Because they're pretty old.
In the UK, I use Minerva Bookshop. Minerva I think he's in Wiltshire now. And Stuart, who runs it, is very efficient. He'll ship straight away. If I
Okay.
email and say, I'd like this, I get an email later that day, and then it usually arrives the following day or the day after. So he's fantastic. I don't know if he ships internationally, but Minerva's my go-to. Other than that, yeah, just whatever your local bookshop is in your country. And if they haven't got them, say, why not? Get them. You should have them. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it was really fun to chat with you. Thank you so much for your time. And I shall get a bit more into Burnett and also Eizayaga. You have definitely inspired me. Thank you so much.
Good stuff. You're welcome. Well, thanks for having me on, Eugenie.
Pleasure.